In the face of illness, any strength, wealth, or power is extremely fragile. The former ancient martial arts assassin Qin Chuan died of illness. At the last moment of his death, he let out a desperate unwillingness to the heavens. Perhaps it was the heavens who felt his will to survive, so they let him be reborn in another identity. I am Decepticon Lightning, a 3-transformation Cybertron warrior. This rebirth lightning is no longer plagued by diseases caused by fragile bodies. Let's see how it rises in the tumultuous universe and creates a more powerful era for the Decepticons. Chapter 1. Defective Lightning. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Starting at December 12 on December 12, 2024, the solar system will have 9 consecutive stars. Blue Star Eagle Sauce Capital Hospital Intensive Care Unit. A patient with a Chinese-American face on his deathbed is undergoing final rescue by a group of doctors. Half an hour later, the chief surgeon, a professor-level doctor, walked out and looked at a lawyer outside the door helplessly, saying, "I'm sorry, the patient cooperated very well and created a longer surgical time for us. It's just that the hand of God took away his soul, and we are powerless." After the lawyer at the door went into the operating room to confirm that the patient was really dead, he walked out coldly and said, "Just do your best, just burn the body directly in the incinerator." After speaking, he left the hospital directly. Parallel Universe, Blue Star, West Coast of America. A group of soldiers are pursuing an extraterrestrial mechanical life form called B1-27. "I am B1-27 from Cybertron, we are not enemies," said the alien robot claiming to be B1-27 while running. Just as the American soldiers blocked the B1-27 robot below the cliff, an F-4 Ghost fighter jet sliced through the sky and charged towards the ground facing off sides. The magazine rotates and 4 Sparrow air-to-air missiles are launched. The missile flew towards the ground. Quickly dodge. The B1-27 robot reminded and immediately dodged behind the nearby car. Bang 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 bang. For explosions, American soldiers were thrown upside down. Before the bloodless soldier could call for help, he cursed the 8th-generation ancestor who attacked his own people. I saw this ghost fighter jet deforming in the air, transforming into a humanoid and directly colliding with the B1-27 robot. In their panic, the two sides fought together, but judging from their size and combat effectiveness, the B1-27 robot was clearly not an opponent of the other. Quickly, the short B1-27 robot was suppressed and violently beaten, and everyone even saw the other party pulling out the parts from the neck of the B1-27 robot. Just as the living wounded thought that B1-27 was dead, the negative state of the villain dying from excessive talk was activated. I saw the B1-27 robot flipping open the magazine armor of the opponent's arm with one hand, revealing 2 short-range missiles. Following closely behind B1-27, the other hand grabbed the opponent's short-range missile and fiercely inserted it into their chest. Following closely behind a B1-27 who flipped over and broke free from constraints, he raised his hand to form a handgun and said, "Go to hell, Lightning." The tall man who was hit in the chest, also known as the Lightning Robot, immediately panicked. Unable to control the escape of B1-27, but attempting to pull out the missile. But because he was too nervous, coupled with the fact that B1-27 had already raised his handgun, it scared his brain counter to the point of crashing, which means he was scared to death. At the moment of lightning death, another soul enters the brain calculator. This soul is the ancient martial arts assassin Qin Chuan. As soon as he saw the missiles on his chest, the shining cannons of the opponent, and his familiar face, he instantly understood what the scene was, so he made a decision immediately. Just watch as the lightning arm changes its blade and directly cuts towards the chest of the missile, while twisting its body in an attempt to dodge the fatal blow from the bumblebee. Bang, bang. two explosions that were very close, one mechanical arm and half of the chest of the Lightning were blown apart, and the other arm connected to the back was severely injured. The whole body rolled down the mountain slope in a fragmented manner. Watching the fragmented Lightning, the Bumblebee, who thought the Lightning had died, stumbled away from the battlefield. Quickly, the inexplicable reinforcements arrived on the battlefield and rescued their comrades, but no enemy was found. A few days later, several large mecha models were placed inside a private repair shop, among which one, resembling an airplane model, suffered the most. One arm disappeared, half of the body was severely disabled, and there were also scars on the back. In front of him, an old man dressed as a repair technician looked helplessly at the abandoned mech imitating the real thing, and couldn't help but curse him into hell. Looking at the mecha works he had collected over the years next to him, the old man let out a sigh and began to dismantle those parts to put on this broken guy. Some areas do not have suitable parts and equipment, and can only be adjusted with excess parts or covered with corresponding protective boards. After more than 10 days of sorting, polishing, and painting, a black and gold giant robot appeared. Looking at this work, the white old man is very satisfied with his own work. At this moment, a large truck drove into the workshop and said, "Old John, your baby is here." "Oh my goodness, what have you done?" "Thompson. Come in quickly." Driver Thompson was shocked by the large mecha figurine in front of him. He circled around the mecha twice, then looked at it, touched it, and said with bright eyes, "Old John, you will be the most beautiful guy at the mecha figurine exhibition." Old John nodded and said, "Of course, I just feel like something's not quite right." Driver Thompson climbed up to the roof of the car and made a few moves, almost falling off. "Hey buddy, he's not Superman, he's ha, Eastern Bruce Lee," he said upon hearing me. Old John's eyes lit up and he said, "Tell me about it. I'm not very familiar with the mysterious East." Thompson jumped off the car roof and almost sprained his foot. "Let me tell you, I'm an Eastern fan, a mysterious Eastern warrior and swordsman even older than Kung Fu Lee." Old John listened to his old friend's boasting and said, "Then you tell me to do it." Thompson said, "Take it, knock off the piston on his face, and put on a mask. Old John understands and will do it immediately." It's just that Old John didn't want to damage the structure inside, so he didn't damage the plug on his face. Well, he needs an Eastern long sword. Wait a moment, I'll draw a picture for you." Thompson sketched on the paper. Old John looked contemptuous and said, "Old buddy, I wet my bed at the age of 2, and the patterns I see are more professional than what you draw now." "Get lost," Thompson cursed. Old John has strong manual dexterity. It's unclear whether it was Thompson's drawing that had a problem or if he had his own ideas. He enlarged a 2-finger wide, edged knife according to normal human proportions, and also thoughtfully carved magical inscriptions on it that Old John himself didn't know. However, this Tang Dao is not made of any high-end metal, as it is handmade, it is made of ordinary steel plate. Thompson looked at the knife and said, "It looks good, but it's a bit like the samurai sword from Little Days. However, this knife is more domineering. Old John, your design concept is really great." Old John also felt that he had a natural talent for design. "That's for sure. Do you have any other questions?" Thompson racked his brain for a moment before suddenly realizing, a big cloak. He climbed onto his car and then pulled off the tarpaulin and tied it around the neck of the handlebar. "Handsome," he said. Old John was also shocked by the image and said, "He's really handsome." Thompson moved up to Old John and said, "This figurine will be the most beautiful one in the showroom the day after tomorrow. Old John, you should also write my name on it." Old John patted the other person's shoulder and said, "Don't worry, my old friend." Completing the final step of spraying thick glue to shape the cloak, while the two were feeling proud of their work, Thompson's phone rang and he said, "Hi boss." Chapter 2. Mech Handmade Model Exhibition. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A middle-aged man's voice across from him said, "Thompson, why haven't you come back yet? Upon hearing me, Thompson realized it was already very late and said, "Go back immediately." After hanging up the phone, Thompson sighed and said, "Old buddy, that's all for today. Remember to add lighting effects to the mech, which is very important. By the way, do you still need the remaining figurines on the car?" Old John said, "Of course, with this, my new inspiration has formed like a storm, and soon more mecha figurines will appear." Thompson rudely threw the originally exquisite mecha figurines on the ground and drove away. Old John doesn't care either, because soon these handheld mechs will be reshaped in his hands. The next day, Thompson drove a truck to the exhibition hall, pulling the figurine. On the other hand, the military has gone completely crazy because they haven't found either of the two aliens, and even the FBI has gone door-to-door, inspecting each factory building without any corresponding results. Just after Old John and the others left, a team of special agents walked in and didn't pay much attention to the ordinary mecha figurines inside. A future world-themed exhibition composed of super-large technology and ruthless activities is held here in Los Angeles on the West Coast. Space battleships, stealth planes, technological life equipment, individual mechas, large mechas, robots, and more are all available. Many tourists take photos while giving their own evaluations. In the mecha area, Old John and Thompson are nervously connecting circuits. It was mainly after they arrived that they realized there were too many people here and couldn't find the corresponding person in charge for anything they did. In the end, he had no choice but to find a place to install the circuit on his own. In the midst of a busy schedule, Old John finally breathed a sigh of relief. "All right, connect the circuit and let's blast the whole room." Thompson pulled the brake directly below, bang. A slight spark sound followed closely by the flickering of all the electrical appliances around, and the lights on the mecha handle lit up. "Wow, the King of Diablo Kung Fu series." Thompson looked at the red and blue dim lights, combined with the red and black paint on the mecha handle, which was completely the configuration of the entire game. Quickly, more and more people gathered to watch the Diablo series mecha figurines designed by two old men. What they didn't know was that when connected through the circuit, the dormant soul of the mecha's handheld device was instantly awakened by electricity. Qin Chuan looked speechless and said, "There's only soul left. Being electrocuted is still so comfortable." Through mechanical eye vision, it was found that this is an exhibition hall, and this situation generally represents safety. Then recall what happened before. Recalling that Bumblebee's cannon did not hit the missile like in the original work, enhancing the explosive power and directly extinguishing the lightning. But it was because after taking over his body, he forcefully flipped it over and delivered a fatal blow to the back from the Bumblebee. Simultaneously use a hand knife to cut off the connection between the missile and the body, and block the missile's explosion and shock wave with a hand knife blade. But I still suffered from dying injuries and my body went into sleep. This situation still occurs because although I am lightning, I am not lightning, or more directly, I am a replica of lightning, Lightning 201. Lightning is a 3-transformation warrior, a land and air commander of the Decepticons. He dares to compete with the Great Train and others for authority, which is shocking. He belongs to the master who can wrestle with the leader warrior, and his strength is definitely super strong. And I am using the template of lightning to mass-produce replicas or consumables on the production line. The body only has a primary alloy hardness, which is slightly stronger than the good-looking pilots and car soldiers. They use ordinary metal for baking paint. Spark and Brain chips are both beginners, but Brain chips are not as good as miscellaneous soldiers. The Brain chips of those auto soldiers and pilots are intermediate and advanced. The only thing that is stronger than the Autobots is that the Lightning series replicas have strong firepower, even catching up with intermediate and advanced Autobots warriors. This is also why on the battlefield of Cybertron, the Bumblebee can kill a lightning bolt with just 1 foot, and the warriors in the Autobots team will be killed with a single strike from lightning replicas. So for injuries that don't hurt or itch when struck by lightning, hitting oneself becomes a fatal injury. Qin Chuan felt his body, carefully. Although part of it was repaired and blocked by old John, it was still scarred. The most important thing was that he was missing an arm and half a breastplate. Old John used ordinary metal to imitate his left arm to make an identical one, but their strength was not good. The only good news is that you can fully replenish your spark energy through the electricity in the exhibition hall, so that you can use the spark energy for repair and at least deform yourself. The distress was that half of his wings had disappeared and the other half had been dismantled by old John to make other parts, leaving only one deformed form. If you want to repair it and return to Cybertron, there are only two ways. The first is to seize the spark source, which is the Rubik's Cube, and the other is to find a Decepticon repairman to repair it for yourself. However, based on the known situation of the Decepticons, Qin Chuan did not have wings of the same model as Lightning in the Decepticon warships. Qin Chuan believed that the group of maintenance soldiers would completely turn him into a tank that could only run on the ground, so he directly rejected this direction. Of course, there is another way, which is to seek help from an Autobot doctor. Well, just think about it. During the one-week exhibition, old John and his figurines became the most beautiful figures in the entire venue, with many people seeking his autographs and asking about his creative mood. At the end of the exhibition, Thompson drove old John home, but when they opened the door, they exchanged a glance with each other. I waited for a few seconds before walking in. At this moment, the two people were not the handyman and the driver, but two bloodthirsty cheetahs. The two of them chatted and looked around to see if there was anyone, so they began to check the specific situation. 10 minutes later, Thompson and old John sat in the office, and Thompson said, "It should have been someone who came in when we were leaving and didn't touch anything. It was done by a professional." Old John nodded and said, "The office safe has been opened, but the money and gun inside haven't been moved. They should be official people, they should be looking for something." Thompson sneered, "A bunch of trash, they're just causing trouble for us." Old John patted his old friend's shoulder and said, "We're already old and don't need to participate in their affairs anymore. It's great to live a peaceful life. Yeah, I heard many of my colleagues suffer from the so-called war syndrome. What exactly is that? Why are we Americans suffering from this disease? Why are there very few Easterners suffering from it?" Quickly, the two of them talked about war syndrome from being invaded. When it comes to war syndrome, many younger generations have been forcibly laid off, and now there is no way out but to become thugs. Thompson sighed. "A few days ago, he said he wanted to add me 5 apprentices to drive, but I refused directly. Driving a car can also support me. Can we have another 5 apprentices? Speaking of which, Thompson looked at old John and said, "I think there's no problem with these 10 of you. You can add 2 more security guards." Chapter 3. Work Arrangement. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Upon hearing this, old John was furious and said, "Get out of here. You can't even afford to take care of it. Tell me I can take care of it. Can I just take care of it? And add 2 security guards? Are you watching your own people to prevent theft?" Thompson laughed heartily and said, "Just kidding, if we could arrange this, we would have arranged it a long time ago." At that moment, the door rang and the two of them instantly quieted down before looking outside. The knocking outside did not stop, nor did they recklessly enter. Even the third wave of knocking on the door began to produce rhythm. Thompson looked strange and said, "My crow mouth." Old John walked out of the office with a helpless expression, opened the door, and walked in a group of 20 veterans with bulging muscles, firm eyes and confusion, wearing camouflage and cowhide boots. One of them stood up and reported, "The Special Operations Force, 3rd Platoon, 6th Squadron, reported to the seniors that this time there should be 20 people, but actually there are 20 people." Thompson held up the phone and said to old John, "The phone can't be reached. That old bastard will definitely not answer the phone today. Do you want me to drive them back?" Looking at these soldiers, they stood expressionless in place, but their hands sometimes shook unintentionally, knowing that these people were also very worried. They are different from themselves. Thompson and I voluntarily retired and raised themselves without getting married, but these great guys are different. They were orphans from a young age and received military training. It can be said that they know nothing but war, which is also the reason why the soldiers of Gujing Bubo become nervous after they are forced to retire. Old John sighed and said, "Stay, anyway it will be useful in the future. At most, we will receive more private work." Thompson nodded and said, "Stand at attention." All young men immediately stood at attention. Thompson said, "Now that you're with us, just listen to us and divide into two groups, one for the day shift and the other for the night shift. Now you go and transport the figurines from the car to me, put them away, and prepare for dinner." Watching the young men scatter to work, Thompson's face was filled with relief and helplessness. 20 strong guys, they will definitely eat up the two of us, the old men. Old John nodded and said, "So we need a way to make money." The way to make money. Thompson's face showed two expressions of helplessness and indignation. The ways to make money are all occupied by those capitalists, and we don't even have the opportunity to eat the leftovers. So you need an opportunity. Opportunity, where did it come from? Be cautious. When Thompson said the words, opportunity, he immediately recognized that the voice was not from him or old John, and the young men in front of him were all elite warriors, so it was impossible to interrupt them casually. There is only one result, and there are other people in this warehouse. Upon hearing the warning sound, the young man who was already busy immediately got down or found cover to observe his position. Seeing no enemies, he turned his gaze towards the two old men. And two old men were wielding guns at the newly positioned mecha. They immediately picked up their sticks as weapons and ran to old John's side. Old John frowned slightly, pushed away the young man in front of him, and asked the mechanic, "Can you speak?" At that moment, the eyes of the robot operator suddenly flickered with a red light, followed closely by shaking their head and saying, "Don't be nervous, my friend." The mech shook its body and then squatted down directly. "My name is Lightning, from Cybertron. I came here to pursue a Cybertron trader." Lightning shrugged helplessly and said, "It's obvious that I failed. And then you picked me up." Old John furrowed his brow when he heard this, as the information was a bit overwhelming. Thompson widened his eyes in disbelief and said, "Aliens. Are you chasing evil traders?" Lightning smiled awkwardly and said, "Without following the law of conservation of life in the universe, I am the evil warrior." Upon hearing the words of Lightning, several people were all speechless. It was the first time they had seen someone say they were evil. But Lightning's next words made them understand, "I am a military warrior in Cybertron, and I am pursuing civilian warriors, so a war cannot tell who is right or wrong." In front of them were all old soldiers who knew the meaning of flash phone calls. War represents slaughter, and since it is slaughter, there is no such thing as justice. Old John waved his hand and said, "What's the other opportunity you're talking about? Let's help you chase that so-called traitor." Lightning shook his head and said, "That guy is not easy to kill, let alone this matter has nothing to do with you. What I'm talking about is an opportunity to make money." Thompson put down his gun and said, "What's the chance to make money? If there were two of us brothers who would still be here." Lightning pressed the button on the side of his head, and a scene appeared where several soldiers were negotiating with several Baotou brothers. Following Baotou, he angrily picked up his gun and killed the soldiers in front of him. The Soviet Union is about to withdraw from Afghanistan, and their control over that area is the weakest during the war. We can transport weapons from there to sell to warlords and resistance forces. Upon hearing this, Thompson's eyes lit up and he said, "Do you want to become an arms dealer? The development of any power cannot escape the troubles of funds, and you and I are the same. We need money, and we don't care what we want to do, as long as we make money," explained Lightning. Upon hearing this, old John thought for a moment and said, "Can you contact this person?" Lightning nodded and said, "Of course, as long as you're willing." On the side, Thompson raised a serious question, "Where do we find weapons?" We don't have the money to order weapons and ammunition. Thompson is telling the truth, do they still care about it if they have money? Old John looked at the Lightning. Lightning smiled and said, the Soviet Union has entered a state of despair. It's easy to get weapons and ammunition. Old John and the other looked at each other and said, okay. Although it doesn't require too much money, a small amount of funds is still needed. Old John borrowed $50,000 from their old boss, which was not a small amount in 1987. Following closely by freight to Pakistan. After entering Afghanistan, everyone took a car to the territory of a warlord. In the desolate mountainous area, for cars were speeding along the dirt road. There is an off-road vehicle in front, and a military tank with a wild design in the middle. There are 2 troop transport trucks behind. Wow, it's unbelievable that you can transform into a Hummer. Thompson couldn't believe it. I used to be able to turn into a Ghost fighter jet, and it was during aerial patrols that I discovered this transaction. Unfortunately, Old John took my wings apart, said Lightning without any fuss. Upon hearing this, Old John on the side felt a bit embarrassed, but at that time, who knew it wasn't done by hand? Thompson recalled the shock of Qin Chuan's transformation and reorganization in the warehouse. Can all the people on your planet transform? Lightning recalled the memory in his mind. Legend has it that only the oldest group of warriors cannot transform, and the rest can, including cars, fighter jets, weapons, beasts, spaceships, and so on. Chapter 4. Arms Trading. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. De co lois ara trong quatrin lay text. Chapter 5. Tour to Peru. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Upon hearing this, Old John and others were also shocked. This kind of thing is no longer something they can escape if they want to. If that's the case, then I don't know, or I can just participate and at least control my own destiny. Old John nodded and said, I'll call someone over right away. Old John got in the car and started contacting the airport to take a chartered flight to Peru, near the Inca temple. Everyone acted nervously as Thompson looked at the data in his hand on the transport plane. We have 3 armed helicopters, 2 old-fashioned fighter jets, and some tanks, but it will take a little time to transport them over, he said. Lightning said directly, it's not important, what's important is that people go over and help the Autobots attract firepower, so they can better fight against the horror beasts. Upon hearing this, Thompson had a serious expression on his face and said, that would kill many people. Old John handed the other person a glass of water and said, it's better than the destruction of the earth. At night, Lightning took people to the vicinity of the Inca temple and stood outside the airport. Thompson was very helpless and said, what should we do? Don't worry, prepare the equipment first, it's best to get a few guns. Old John, dressed in camouflage, was mobilizing for war next to him. This time we are fighting for Earth, eliminating aliens. Of course, as long as we win, each person costs $200,000, and our brothers who died in battle will receive $500,000. If we fail, there will be no result, and we and the world will be destroyed. Many people have seen the Lightning robot and naturally know that the fact of aliens is true. A person suddenly asked, Boss, who are our enemies? Upon hearing this, Old John didn't know how to answer, but instead looked at the Lightning. If there's a chance, you can join me in taking down the cannon fodder. If there's no chance, all you need to know is 2 things. First, the humans around you are companions, and second, among those robots, only cannon fodder can be eliminated by the weapons in your hands. It's not difficult to find and kill those cannon fodder, right? All the mercenaries glanced at each other and said, yes, sir. Lightning turned into a Hummer and said to John, don't act rashly, wait for my news. The next day, Old John and others were waiting in a warehouse when suddenly an explosion came from the mountainous area. They're really here, the messenger said excitedly. Old John immediately called Lightning and said, they're here. Shall we take action? Don't wait for my news impulsively, the final battle hasn't arrived yet, replied Lightning, who was climbing the mountain slope. Lightning searched nearby for a while but couldn't find what he wanted, which indicates that those passages have been covered by the mountains. Lightning angrily punched the nearby stone and said, "Damn it." Bang, click. Two sounds appeared, and Lightning immediately felt something was wrong. He peeled open the gravel and saw an alloy plate exposed inside. Upon opening the alloy plate, one could see that it was hidden in this mountain, leading to the access to the space generator control panel. "Found it," Lightning said excitedly. The electronic eye scans the surrounding mountains and finally stays in one area. "That's it there." Then he walked into the dense forest and hid. "Old buddy, I've sent you the coordinates. You come over immediately and let the warrior hide." The next day at dawn, vibrations came from a nearby mountain peak, and Lightning flashed through the gaps in the forest to see the leader of the fearsome beast, the natural disaster, proudly controlling the transmitter. "I saw it, should I give him a shot?" Lightning could hear the fear in old John's mouth. Anyone who saw a hole in the sky would be afraid. "Don't worry, there will be someone playing forward." Lightning had just finished speaking, and from the other direction of the mountain slope, the Autobots and the Big Mech joined forces and killed the horror beast. At the same time, the Autobot Phantom brought the human male and female protagonists to another area, allowing them to enter the main control area through an energy transfer channel and cancel the transfer. On the side of the horror beast, a large number of spider minions were dispatched in an attempt to stop the Autobots, causing both sides of the battlefield to entangle. View each window of the instant noodle channel and see that the other person is approaching the main control area. The main battlefield is not ideal, with too many enemies and some powerful warriors from the Fear Beast squad. Fire. Just as the Autobots and the Big Mech were being suppressed, there were sounds coming from all around. Following a round of grenades hitting the battlefield, the unresponsive Fear Beast was directly shattered by 155mm grenades. Bang, bang. Alcee immediately hid behind the stone. "What's the situation?" "It's not like reinforcements. They are indiscriminate bombing." The Leopard Warrior roast. Following closely behind two old-fashioned fighter jets flew over from afar, the cannons on both sides of the wings spewed flames, shattering the Fear Beasts. Optimus Prime saw the opportunity and said, "Follow the passage opened up by the fighter jet in charge over." He had just taken action when 3 Black Hawk armed helicopters appeared around him. The rocket and machine gun bullets above swept out like free money. Following closely around, fully armed human soldiers began to attack. Seeing this, the natural disaster was not a fool, so he immediately called for support. "Master, I need support, support." In the sky, across from the space bridge that had already been torn apart, a large number of airdrop pods were ejected, from which more powerful terrifying beasts jumped out. Mechanical scorpions, spiders, and other monsters. There are more and more enemies. It seems impossible to break in at all. What should we do? Let's bomb with artillery. From a distance, Lightning observed the war, and the coalition forces had entered a complete disadvantage. Lightning is not prepared to hide at this time because it is meaningless to hide. But at that moment, a transport plane flew over and threw the Bumblebee down as it passed through the air. The invincible Bumblebee, which had already been launched, landed in the air and aimed at the airdrop pods that had fallen around it. Breaking down these airdrop silos and following the crazy natural disaster, he did a very aggressive act, which was to shoot at the airborne Hornet. The Nightingale, who was originally fighting against the Bumblebee in the air, directly faced the handgun shells of the natural disaster and the attack of the Bumblebee. This guy exploded under the double blow of the two main characters, and he didn't persist for 2 seconds. But even so, the war situation had been determined, and Lightning sighed and raised one arm to launch 3 missiles in a row towards the battlefield control console. "I was just thrown out by a natural disaster and crashed into a missile, causing it to explode." The natural disaster looked at the Cybertron people who were launching missiles in the distance, but he didn't know or need to know them. The lightning did not stop, but continued to launch missiles, even if it wasted the few super energy bodies in the body, because if it was not launched at this time, it would be too late to launch when the Universe Emperor arrived. As for whether or not to surrender, in a word, the little Karami family is not interested. The missile was launched at once, although it didn't seem to have much effect, overall it still restrained the view of natural disasters. This also gave Optimus Prime an opportunity. Similarly, the unparalleled Optimus Prime was not rubbed by the natural disaster on the ground this time, but was rubbed by the natural disaster on the transmitter. However, even so, the entire environment on the battlefield has already been predetermined. Especially just now, the natural disaster would rather have injured herself than smashed the control panel, making it impossible for the black girl to remove the key. Chapter 6. Ending Leaving. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. De co lois ara trong quatrin lay text. Chapter 7. Entangled Fighting. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. The scorpion's tail stabbed straight, and this time the lightning did not dodge, but instead grabbed the scorpion's tail. The other party seems to have been prepared to swing two huge pliers directly. His speed is fast, the speed of lightning is faster, he kicks one side at a time, and the scorpion flies out horizontally. Bang! The scorpion's huge body fell to the ground, splashing a burst of smoke and dust. Lightning released the scorpion's tail and said, "Are you still here?" The scorpion flipped over and charged forward again. But this time it was even worse, as lightning kicked the leaping scorpion with a flying kick. "You're too weak." Scorpion was a bit unwilling and turned around again to charge towards him, but the lightning's speed was faster, and he charged directly towards an iron mountain to knock the opponent out. Bang! A scorpion-shaped depression appeared on the wall. Following me can not only enhance your strength, but also teach you more combat skills. Lightning looked at the other party and said coldly, "Otherwise, even if you escape from here, you will just be a miscellaneous soldier dying on the way to fight against other forces." Upon hearing Lightning say this, the scorpion falling from the wall trembled and stood up, then fell down again. At this moment, his mind was not about how to fight, but rather about following the natural disaster and charging before replaying on Earth. As a result, most scorpion monsters were easily killed by the enemy. And when the battle is over, those wounded and dead comrades, as well as the planet, will all be devoured by the Universe Emperor. As long as it is a wise life, there is no one who is not afraid of death, nor is there anyone willing to be eaten as food by others after their own death. Moreover, I was saved by the same kind in front of me, and coupled with the fact that the other person is stronger than me, surrendering may also be a good choice. Thinking of this, the scorpion flipped over and exposed its belly, indicating that it had surrendered. Lightning walked over to the scorpion and reached out to open a metal shield under his neck. An electric current flickered on the data board outside his finger. After being struck by an electric current, the scorpion's body trembled and then reversed again. Lightning reached out and caressed the scorpion's head. "From today on, you will be a member of the Decepticons." Accepting this big guy can also be considered a great help to this team. Especially the scorpion's ability to burrow may be an advantage in the Middle Eastern desert. The next day, the group flew to Afghanistan on military transport planes, transporting weapons to the Middle East and Africa. Old John took out the order and said, "Iraq's $3 million order, 32 arms orders from Africa, a total of $3 million, Rwanda's $600,000, and Yemen's $600,000 arms orders. We support that side in the Eastern European War." Lightning sat in the warehouse and said, "That side doesn't support either. By the way, how do you divide the portion of Thompson's death?" "You'll just take it all." Old John threw the cigar on the ground and said, "Thompson has no family left, so the cost is half for each of us." Lightning thought for a moment and said, "The alloy issue you mentioned earlier can be put on the agenda. If you can get good alloys, I can get 60%. Old John found a metal rod from a nearby box and said, aluminum titanium alloy has strong hardness, mild high temperature, and good thermal conductivity. He took out another one and knocked on the metal frame next to him. Tungsten titanium alloy, super hard, special for aircraft engines, but the material is limited. He said the third one is a black stick, manganese titanium alloy, not to mention its strength, is also relatively rare. Lightning looked at these three alloys. Although they didn't reach the level of Cybertron primary alloy, they were definitely stronger than the metal on his body. Are you sure you can process them? We can process some directly. First replace the parts made of ordinary metal that I used to make models with, said Old John. Last time in the war, Old John flew a helicopter to attack the spider monster on the ground. However, he witnessed the strength of those robots with his own eyes, and the lightning now cannot reach it. He's right not to rush forward. If he goes up and punches the enemy, maybe the spider monster will be fine and lightning will disintegrate directly. This is also why Old John wants to strengthen the lightning's body, otherwise this combat power can only serve as long-range artillery fire. Lightning sighed and said, "Can you give it a try first? I don't think I have enough money." Old John patted the other person's thigh and said, "I can take out my money and Thompson's money for you to use first. You need to repay them." Lightning nodded, and now he could only do so. In fact, he was not changing, mainly because the Earth's ordinary alloy can only reach the level of Cybertron's primary alloy. Replacing a batch of parts requires a lot of energy, which is not cost-effective for Transformers, where energy is life. However, looking at this Earth in a different direction, it is important to improve a bit. Before finding the source of ignition, one must first save their life. Now the two have a clear division of labor, and Old John is responsible for contacting the business and measuring the dimensions of the parts on Lightning to create new alloy parts. Lightning leads the team to deliver goods to enemy-occupied areas. If they encounter someone who eats black, they will also eat them. For example, this time, the convoy entered a small town and Warlord Muhammad walked over with his men. After inspecting the weapons brought by Lightning, the other party took out a box. A mercenary walked over and opened the box, which contained a portion of money and a portion of diamonds. Just take a look at the money, the diamonds need to be checked one by one. During the inspection, Muhammad's pistol was pressed against the mercenary's head, while many armed militants with guns appeared around. Black eats black. The mercenary was not afraid, but looked at Muhammad playfully. Muhammad laughed wildly and said, "What's going on? My people are all around here. Those who are sensible should get out of here, otherwise you will all die here." The mercenary glanced sideways at the Hummer behind him, then raised his lips and said, "Since that's the case, let's withdraw." Muhammad said, "Let them." Before he could even finish speaking, he watched as the mercenary snatched the other person's pistol and followed closely, saying, "Calm down. If you don't calm down, you'll be dead. Your family and your beautiful wife will become someone else. You. Calm down, step back, all step back for me." Muhammad was scared. The mercenaries hesitated as they looked around at the enemies and began to look at each other, knowing that they had lost their backbone and were looking for a support. The mercenary said again, "No one wants to encounter this kind of thing, so I suggest a win-win solution. You all go to the opposite side, we retreat, and we will keep the money and weapons for you." Upon hearing this, the armed militants' eyes lit up because what they wanted was weapons, not the lives of the enemy. This was also because it would be troublesome for too many Americans to die here. Upon hearing that Muhammad, who could obtain the weapons, also showed greed on his face, he just wanted to eat this batch of weapons and not give money. Only in this way can he recruit more people with money and earn more money. Chapter 8. Arrogance and Despair. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Everyone come out and retreat, immediately, or else everyone will be executed. Muhammad roared wildly, thinking that this guy was an enemy of the armed militants. When the other party had almost reached the opposite side, the mercenaries dragged Muhammad back to the side of the Hummer. At this moment, Muhammad also noticed something was wrong. What are you doing? What are you doing? Why didn't you let me go? You. When he arrived at the rear of the car, a frightened situation appeared. He saw the Hummer carriage cover suddenly flipping on both sides next to him, and 2 missiles appeared. Before the armed militants on the opposite side could understand, he watched the missiles launch directly, and at the same time, 2 more missiles appeared when the missile carrier flipped over. Swish! Bang, bang! The explosion sounded on the street, with the windows of buildings on both sides hidden on the opposite side. The armed militants behind the streetcar went straight up to the sky. Armed militants are in direct chaos. The mercenary wore an arrogant smile on his face and said, "Go ahead, disarm them for me." The mercenaries behind rushed forward and directly captured the armed militants who had been knocked unconscious for 7 nights, and there was no need to treat the injured. They shot and killed them directly, which was also considered to help them escape. Quickly completing all of this, the mercenary pulled out his dagger with a wild smile on his face and said, "Tell me what you can do for us. If I'm useless, I'll die." I have money," Muhammad said hastily. He never expected the entire good situation to be so easily overturned and completely annihilated by the enemy. The mercenary's mouth curved upwards and he said, "Tell me all the money in your vault and bank card." This. Muhammad was a bit frightened, but the mercenaries didn't give him a chance. "Take it down and let him speak." 15 minutes later, a subordinate walked over and knocked on the lightning door of the carriage, saying, "Captain, the target has been solved." The lightning-changing Hummer flashed its headlights a few times and said, "Occupy the opponent's villa, this has become our stronghold." The mercenary nodded and began to take the remaining people to pursue and kill the fleeing armed militants. Half an hour later, the town villa. Several men, women, and children were beaten to death on one side, while more than 50 armed militants knelt on the other side. The mercenary captain said, "We should have killed all of you, but for the stability of the town, you survived." Upon hearing this, all the prisoners breathed a sigh of relief. I heard the mercenary captain say again, "But even without a job these days, your life is not easy. So our boss has decided that as long as you work for our boss, you can continue to hold a gun and become a superior person." Speaking of this, the mercenary captain glanced at the slightly agitated prisoners below and said, "Now that you have changed your appearance, you can immediately become your own person with weapons. If you become your own person, you can receive a month's salary in advance, $500. Upon hearing these words, many people were amazed. The mercenary captain once again administered a harsh medicine. Those who perform well can be promoted to team captain, squadron captain, or even get you an American green card without any problem. If some of you refuse, it's the enemy. You can see the fate of the enemy by looking around. Next to him were only the bodies of the Muhammad family, which meant that they were being eradicated and the enemy's families were not spared. Since they have a way out, they can only choose to join. Arrange for someone to clean up the villa, followed closely by transporting batches of weapons, even including 2 armed helicopters. With the support of the locals, the speed of transporting weapons was faster, and Old John's arms business had the intention of becoming a major military merchant. Warehouse. Old John looked at Lightning, who had just replaced the parts, and said, "How do you feel?" The Lightning shook its arm, jumped, and tapped the alloy steel plate on its body. This high-grade alloy indeed felt good. "It's pretty good, but it's just too expensive." The parts on the Lightning side, along with the full-body outer protective plate, have spent all the money the 3 of them have earned from selling weapons in recent years. Old John smiled helplessly and said, "Money is a bastard. Just spend it and we'll earn it. Let's talk about our next job." Lightning's machine gun kept switching, and the missiles on his body occasionally ejected. "How did you get through the military relationship?" A long time ago, Old John and others were trying to establish a good relationship with the U.S. military by arranging retired soldiers from some organizations to serve in the military. This way, you can receive more military orders, as well as protection and information support from the other party. It's just that Lightning didn't mention the specific reason for proposing this idea before, and old John thought Lightning was just helping him arrange a way out. Many people have entered the military to participate in positions, but they are all small roles. Occasionally, they can provide some good news. Why do you ask this? Old John answered truthfully. The lightning pressed its ear position, and a beam of light flickered, revealing a model of a dam. Old John frowned slightly and said, "Hoof dam. You want to blow it up for terrorist activities." "I'm not that foolish," Lightning denied. "The construction of the Hufu Dam is not just for the development of electricity, but for another reason. Those who don't know think that building the Hufu Dam is to change people's livelihoods and generate electricity for irrigation." Upon hearing this, old John also frowned slightly, because there was nothing wrong with some things if they were not carefully considered, and if they were carefully considered in detail, he could see that something was not right. For example, as far as he knows, it is normal for the dam to have military protection, but the military strength of the Hufu Dam is somewhat excessive. Although it has been developed into a scenic spot, entry into the interior is not allowed. Are you saying that those armies are actually staying there for other reasons? Lightning nodded, and the light in his eyes flickered, transforming the image into another square object. Rubik's Cube, also known as the source of fire, is the source of life generated by Decepticon warriors. 10,000 years ago, due to the disappearance of the Cybertron war, many of our warriors were searching for it, and according to my latest information, that a source of fire is located inside the Hoof Dam. Upon hearing me, old John frowned slightly and said, "Are you trying to create an army to unify the world?" Lightning sneered, "I'm not that bored." Speaking of body changes, click click click. Directly transformed into a car, followed by another change, clattering. Clattering. Attempted to turn into an airplane, but failed. Lightning stands up. The parts are good, but they have no spirituality at all and cannot support me in making the third transformation. Only with the original energy transformation of the ignition source can these parts on my body support me in making the third transformation. Upon hearing these words, old John fell silent and said, "Dude, I don't mean I don't want to help you. Our hundreds of subordinates, if something happens and we face the national machinery, it will be the end of our entire army, so we can't take any risks." Lightning's eyes once again projected a beam of light, but this time it was no longer the previous Rubik's Cube, but an old acquaintance, a yellow Beetle sedan, and a police car. "I cherish our friendship as much as you do, and it is precisely because of this that I did not propose this plan earlier." Chapter 9. Starting with Change 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Lightning continued, "According to my information, the bumblebee has been very active lately, and it is likely that it has found clues to the source of the fire. I have also received information from Red Spider, a senior commander of the Decepticons, on Earth, and this police car is a Decepticon spy and a roadblock." Upon hearing this, old John also felt helpless. He knew that since he met Lightning, the forces and enemies behind Lightning would eventually confront each other. But he hoped that he wouldn't encounter it until he died, but his wish was in vain. Old John said helplessly, "What do we need to do?" "Steal out the ignition source, or take it out and offer it to your commander." There is a fundamental difference between humans and transformers in terms of body size and suppression, so he does not believe that he needs to maintain his true nature and love America. And America is not a country worth loving. Since there is no way to change it, let's join in. Anyway, they are all under the command of Lightning. I'm not that tiger, nor am I that foolish. The Decepticons' acquisition of the spark source will only enslave and destroy the Earth, which is not a good thing for both of us. Lightning exclaimed astonishingly. "Don't think I can protect you. I only have one cannon fodder in the Decepticons. I can't even protect myself, old man. To survive in future wars, besides looking at yourself, we can only support each other. So what do you mean by saying the source of the fire? What exactly do I need to do? Old John is not a fool, he knows better than anyone about the situation in various countries on Earth. He also knew that besides aliens like lightning, there must be others on Earth. Even if not, it would be difficult to deal with the various major forces hidden in various countries. Previously, he and Thompson relied on each other and had nothing to do with high-level affairs. Now, it's different. He has a group of young brothers to support, and he also needs to give them a family and future. Everything he does needs to be carefully considered. Lightning felt helpless. In fact, he also wanted to live like this, but in the future, this world will be a world of war. Don't think about being alone. I need you to send me and Scorpion into the Hoof Dam, only then can we access and absorb the energy of the fire source, and help me evolve into an intermediate warrior. This kind of thing is both difficult and simple. Speaking of difficulty, it is because it is very difficult to enter the US military base, but speaking of simplicity, if there is a reception inside, it is much simpler. Mainly, some US military officers have private cars or the ability to directly drive military vehicles into and out of bases. Old John is considering the feasibility of this matter, especially how to avoid the other party's inspection. Lightning said, "This matter can be taken action now. Design an opportunity for me to enter the military base." Old John is considering the feasibility of the plan. A week later, a military officer on vacation entered the small town tavern. Old John raised his glass to him after seeing him. The other party was also surprised when they saw Old John and walked over to sit next to the bar. "You're still drinking at your age, aren't you afraid to just hang up?" Old John laughed heartily and said, "I'm all alone. What's so scary about me, but you just paid off your debt and came here to be cool." This officer is none other than Lieutenant Chris, a dam guard with black materials, as investigated by Old John. A while ago, this guy couldn't afford money and could only resell weapons in the city with a novice, but was accidentally discovered. The police chased several streets. Fortunately, I met Old John who had just driven a Hummer. This type of active Hummer must have been driven by someone with status. So he jumped onto the car and hid. That's why Old John got to know Chris. Later, Chris provided weapons to Old John, who then gave him money to repay the loan. "How's the matter I asked you to help with?" Chris doesn't know what's going on deep inside the dam, he just knows it's an ordinary dam. So when Old John suggested finding a job for his young men, he immediately agreed. It's just that it's still a bit difficult to enter like this, Chris can only arrange these few people on the periphery. I don't know what's wrong with my superiors, but they suddenly refused me to arrange for soldiers to enter the interior and could only patrol outside. Upon hearing this, Old John sighed and said, "You didn't say that back then, and you were saying that you would arrange a position with real power for us. Now there's only a soldier left. A soldier is not worth $500,000, well, but it's a bit puzzling why you owe us that number." Upon hearing Old John bring up the old story again, wait a minute, Old John, don't do this, okay? Having a job now would be good, but if you want a real power job, you'll need some money to manage it. If you've considered 500,000 yuan, you'll want to find one inside. Old John waved his hand, interrupted Chris's explanation, and ordered Chris a glass of whiskey. "I understand you very well, but you promised me," he said. Chris helplessly took a sip of the pungent whiskey and said, "Don't do this, buddy. I don't want to jump from one pit of fire to another." Chris knew that if Old John didn't let go, he would have to repay the $500,000 he had advanced for himself, and he would have been kicked out of the military for reselling weapons and sent to prison. Old John thought for a moment and said, "Give you some more time, come up with a solution." Upon hearing me, Chris felt a bit embarrassed because it wasn't that he didn't want to, but that his superiors had rejected him. Old John smiled and patted his shoulder, "Don't be nervous, I can provide some funds, but not too much." Chris nodded. In the warehouse, old John looked at the various weapons in front of him, all of which were advanced weapons sold from the hoof dam, including sophisticated rifles and grenade guns. In addition, the bullets next to them are not uniformly yellow and orange, but rather bullets with red, blue, and green painted heads. These are armor-piercing rounds, tracer rounds, explosive rounds, and other special bullets. The mercenary captain pulled the bolt and looked at the rifling inside, excellent quality. Old John walked in and said, "How's it going?" The mercenary captain immediately saluted Old John and said, "They're all good guns, even better than when we were organizing." Old John looked at Lightning and said, "Do you really want to use these weapons to fight? That's your tribe." Lightning sneered, "Decepticons never show mercy to the weak, let alone care about their so-called compatriots. They only care about combat and their own strength." This statement was even spoken casually by Lightning, because often the Decepticons would send their injured comrades to meet the primordial heavenly sovereign with a single shot. Only a small number of true partners will help each other, such as knocking down and dead fire, bouncing and crushing. Old John sighed, even as he grew old, he had to curse the thief. It's not easy to live. A week later, Chris called Old John and there was no news yet, but he could arrange the work of 3 people first. So Old John sent 3 long retired subordinates to the hoof dam, becoming the outermost security guard. With this level of identity and Chris's help, entering the peripheral military camp should not be a problem. What needs to be considered now is the internal situation. Chapter 10. Preparation for Change 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. On the observation deck of Hufu Dam, an armed Hummer parked on one side, and 3 security personnel got off the vehicle and stood neatly on the side to guard. At this moment, the dam manager felt a sense of appreciation when he saw these 3 security guards. Or to put it another way, looking at the lazy appearance of the soldiers wearing camouflage, I'm used to it and don't really like it. And this kind of professional standing guard is the favorite of soldiers. What's going on with these 3 people? Upon hearing this, the peripheral soldier explained, "This is the invited peripheral security. We can consider this as a testing pilot. If the effect is good, many ordinary areas will adopt this security mode to reduce the participation of regular soldiers in escort tasks." Upon hearing this, the person in charge was curious, which company do they belong to? The peripheral soldier paused for a moment and then said, "A retired soldiers club from the East Special District, a friend of Lieutenant Chris." The person in charge thought for a moment and said, "Let Chris bring the club manager here. I think we can talk about it." Quickly, Chris excitedly ran to the club and said, "Old John, good news, good news." John was puzzled and said, "Is there any news about work?" Chris chuckled and said, "It's more important than that." Old John poured the other party a cup of coffee and said, "Tell me about it." Chris immediately conveyed the person in charge's words to Old John, who was impressed and said, "Really?" Chris nodded and said, "It's absolutely true, Old John. We're almost becoming colleagues." Originally, this person in charge wanted to use the Hufu Dam to generate revenue, so the necessary image design was necessary. And the soldiers in Old John's hands began to retrain according to the training methods of Eastern powers after arriving at Old John's place. So after they came out, the image of the standard warrior was very eye-catching, which was much more beautiful than the blind stream in America. Due to some special reasons, he is planning to outsource this task. And Chris gave Old John information that he appeared to be an arms dealer and also engaged in some mercenary business, with the main business coming from the Pentagon. What does this resume prove? It proves that Old John is his own person and that he naturally needs to take care of himself. So everyone drove along with Chris to the dam military zone. After a simple inspection, we entered the working area inside the dam, where the person in charge, Lawrence, had long been waiting. "Nice to meet you. I am Colonel Lawrence, the head of dam security." After shaking hands with Colonel Lawrence, Old John said, "John Senna, you can call me Old John, the head of the Los Angeles Military Club and a handmade craftsman at the Los Angeles Science and Technology Exhibition. Colonel Lawrence laughed heartily. He didn't care about old John's identity as an engineer, he cared about the power of the military club in old John's hands. "Dude, I know you're looking for a job for us veterans, and I admire your feelings," he said. "This is not false." After old John and Thompson collaborated with Lightning, they made plans for the future. In addition to selling weapons and launching wars everywhere, we also need to collect information about veterans, help them join security companies, find jobs for them, and so on. In recent years, the United States has been waging wars everywhere, with a large number of retired soldiers, sick veterans, and many others facing difficulties in their lives. They have even entered the underworld or wandered directly on the streets, which can be said to be unbearable. And the authorities are also powerless, because there are too many ordinary soldiers to solve it. In addition, American soldiers are accustomed to laziness, and they can kill people on the battlefield, as well as participate in some abnormal battles and exchanges, so they cannot live a quiet life in an ordinary position in a company. And old John is responsible for finding a suitable job for those restless soldiers, or directly reshaping these retired veterans to make their lazy personalities more stable. This also makes it easier for society to accept them. So now old John is also very famous in this circle, and it is precisely because of this that old John's club can enter the view of the Pentagon. Colonel Lawrence said, "I want to establish a security team on this perimeter, which would be more conducive to the development of the tourism industry." Upon hearing this, old John's face immediately became excited. "That's a good relationship. If that's the case, I can arrange for at least 60 great guys to work here." Upon hearing this, Lawrence was also very satisfied. "I think the same way, of course I have requirements," he said. Old John didn't care at all. "You said, as long as I can be satisfied, I will definitely be satisfied." Lawrence pointed to the 3 security guards standing at the door and said, "I only want this kind of one. Although it's unfair to many retired veterans, I also need to be accountable to my superiors." Upon hearing me, old John laughed heartily and said, "Don't worry, it's not a problem at all. The soldiers who join my club will be reshaped, eliminating those scumbags with bad habits or bad behavior. They will undergo collective military training to prevent them from developing war syndrome due to a peaceful life." Yes, that's right," Lawrence nodded immediately. "That's the kind of person I want. How much do you think it would cost to outsource this task to your club?" Old John felt a bit embarrassed. "I'm not sure about this. In the past, I was at least responsible for helping with matchmaking and bridging. If I used the name of the club, I would need to provide insurance, resettlement expenses, living allowances, and so on for these soldiers, plus a minimum monthly salary of 5,000 yuan. No, buddy, you're offering them 5,000 too much. My young men don't even earn that much." Lawrence immediately refused when he heard that he wanted to pay 5,000. How could this be possible? Even if his superiors don't agree with such a high salary, he feels embarrassed to draw a sum from it. Old John thought for a moment and said, "How much do you think?" Lawrence thought for a moment and said, "What I want is a spirit guy. I don't need special talents with strong combat abilities. Their salary is best around 1,000 yuan. As for the security system, you can rest assured that it can be included in the dam defense, and logistics is definitely the best." Upon hearing this, old John thought for a moment and said, "One person costs 1,000, 60 people cost $60,000, plus a few responsible persons, it's $70,000. You also need to pay some taxes and so on. How about $100,000 per month? You are responsible for providing dormitories and offices. 100,000. Lieutenant Colonel Lawrence was lost in thought. The price was really not high. If someone else could ask for 700,000 to 800,000 yuan per month, and the vast majority of this money would go into the pockets of capitalists, and the 100,000 yuan could be handled by the Dam Tourism Bureau, especially in solving the work of 60 retired soldiers. The problem is that America is not a country that loves sincerity, and it is necessary to have a card. Lawrence needs to eat, and his subordinates, colleagues, and superiors also need to eat. If you take 100,000 yuan, I will contribute 30 yuan to you. No, 50 yuan can solve everything. Lawrence's point is, I'll spend 500,000 yuan, how to wash the money clean is your responsibility. Old John nodded and said, no problem, we can have a pleasant cooperation.